Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining our WatchGuard and NetSecOPEN webinar, How to Evaluate Real-World Firewall Performance. My name is Christine Ramsdell. I am your moderator for today. I'm also joined here by two presenters who we will go into more depth of their biography here in a few slides. I have Brian Monkman, Executive Director of NetSecOPEN, and Stephen Helm, Product Marketing Manager at WatchGuard. So before we begin, I want to go over a few quick housekeeping items. The first is that the audio streamed through both your computer and there is a dial-in number. Second, there is a Q&A box on your widget menu. All questions will be answered at the end, but at any time, please feel free to enter in your questions into the box. We also have a handouts tab, and you can download the slides, a copy of these slides from there. The on-demand recording of this webinar will be sent to you via email, and it'll be posted on our WatchGuard.com webinars page. Lastly, we do offer CPE credit for all our webinars. In this case, this webinar is for an hour long, which equals to 1 credit. Please check in with your certification body for more details. So without further ado, Steve, I'm going to pass it off to Steve to take it away.
Great, thank you, Christine. Thanks everybody for joining us today. Very excited to talk to you a little bit about how we've interacted with NetSecOPEN and some of the testing engagements that we've had with their organization and what that means really for the firewall industry at large. So a little bit of an agenda of what we're going to go through today. We're going to have Brian introduce the NetSecOPEN organization, talk about some of the challenges that we've seen with proprietary testing, and discuss the benefits of developing and having open standards that can be applied across the whole firewall industry. We'll talk about what that certification process looks like, and then really dig into WatchGuard and why we participate and look at some of the specifics that we saw in the NetSecOPEN report on our most recent testing of our Firebox platform. So with that, let's talk a little bit about who we are. So my name is Stephen Helm. I'm a product marketing manager here at WatchGuard. I've been in the cybersecurity industry for about a decade. Today, I'm primarily focused on our network security business, the Firebox firewall platform. And we have with us Brian Monkman, and he's an executive director of NetSecOPEN, which is a nonprofit membership-driven organization with the goal of developing open standards for testing network security products. He's a 25-year network security veteran and has extensive experience in technical support, sales engineering, and program management roles at technology companies, including Nortel Networks, Iska Labs, Sterling Software, and others. At NetSecOPEN, he leads an effort to significantly change network security product testing by developing open and transparent testing standards that will be used by approved test labs to test network security products in a manner that produces verifiable and repeatable results. So with that, I'm going to hand it off here to Brian.
Thanks, Stephen, and hello, everybody. NetSecOPEN started about 3 years ago, and our goal here is to enable open and real-world performance security testing. And the performance and security, unlike a lot of other testing standards and lab testing and so on, are actually joined together because we feel that you cannot have verifiable and reasonably important performance metrics without security being enabled. So our ultimate goal is to be able to compare products on an apples-to-apples basis, and up until recently, that's really not been possible, and for a number of reasons. But we're working on changing that, and we bring together leading security product vendors, test solutions, service vendors, and test labs. And our ultimate mission is to, with the membership of NetSecOPEN, is to develop the open and standardized tests that are based on real-world network conditions. And this sounds really quite easy, but it is very challenging to do that. Our standardized requirements for network firewalls have been completed. They've been submitted to the IETF, and they're in moving through the process of becoming an RFC, and more standards are actually on the way. Steve, next slide. Thanks. So open testing standards really are a win for everybody, and the reasons are pretty basic. With open testing standards, everybody can review them and offer input, either within the NetSecOPEN framework or within the IETF benchmark working group framework, which we submitted our standard. It allows security product vendors to better meet your expectations and increase your satisfaction and leverage the certification testing to shorten your sales cycle. You, the customers, will gain confidence in these decisions, and the testing services can easily certify products because the test process, the test requirements have all been vetted continuously, and as the bar gets raised, also the test tools that are used, and in NetSecOPEN, it's Spirent, Ixia, Keysight, and the Avi. They're all structured in such a way to make it easy to test the products. And then organizations everywhere can then build on all of that and have confidence that there will be a baseline that can be used to secure their operations, to stop the cyber threats that are constantly changing faster. Because the standards that we're developing and the infrastructure around it is not static. While the RFC itself may be static, we've written it in such a manner that we can change things as the threatscape changes. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in future slides. Go ahead, Stephen. So NetSecOPEN memberships consist of the test tool vendors, of which I've already talked about, test labs, product vendors, and enterprises. Now, the enterprises is something that we really would like to add more to NetSecOPEN, because getting input from enterprises is critical, and it's very easy for security product vendors to drive the certification requirements down to an easier level, and not or say that, well, enterprises aren't asking for this more challenging requirements. If we have enterprises deeply involved, then the enterprise can say, well, no, actually, and then we can go from there. NetSecOPEN is governed by an 8-member board of directors, which consists of 7 members and myself, the executive director. Currently, the board consists of representatives from Spirent, Ixia, Keysight, ENTC, and UNH-IOL. Those are 2 test labs. And then Cisco, Fortinet, and SonicWall, and then myself. Next slide, Stephen. So the goal of NetSecOPEN is that all of the tests will be conducted against test requirements that have been developed and are available in the public domain, approved test labs using approved test tools. The labs are overseen by a NetSecOPEN certification body, and all of the tests will be conducted against the standards, and the testing requirements will not be changed arbitrarily. And that's one of the criticisms that I've heard on a regular basis from a number of the members, saying that we want these requirements to be developed in such a way that we are not going into a test and expecting it to be a moving target. We want the test requirements to be fixed and predictable. Now, that, of course, makes it difficult to structure tests in such a manner that make it easy to change. So as I said a little bit previously, we're setting things up in such a way that we can change things as is needed. For example, we're developing vulnerability sets using exploits, using malware, and we will be changing those on an ongoing basis, probably once a year. The labs being overseen by the certification body, a lab, when it joins NetSecOPEN, does not automatically become an accredited lab. They have to go through an accreditation process, and they need to test a reference set product and provide the results to the certification body, and then we'll review it and go back to them if there's anything that doesn't look right, and basically just make sure that that they can test properly and reproduce results. We also have a pretty high expectation that that there needs to be rigorous controls in and around testing in order to promote reproducibility. The same thing happens with the test tools. Just because a test tool vendor will be a member of NetSecOPEN does not automatically mean that all of the test tools are approved. They actually have to prove through testing that their test tools will actually deliver the results that are expected. Takes time. It's a slow process, but in the long term, I think it's really valuable to the industry as a whole. Next slide, please, Steve. So all the reports and supporting documentation will be freely available to the public. This is one of the core tenets of NetSecOPEN, is open. Be open in the test standards, the guidelines, the reports, and any supporting documentation. And by supporting documentation, I mean things like the test reports that's produced by the labs, the configuration files for the product that was actually tested, configuration information on the test tool, and just a general outline of how the lab set up their test bed. The goal being that anybody with a reasonable level of knowledge could then go and reproduce these tests and then hopefully be able to build on them. You know, it's important to be open and transparent. A lot of criticism of other labs has been, you know, there's guidelines, there's requirements, but we don't actually know how the tests are executed. We can't prepare for the tests, we can't verify the tests, and we've taken that input and turned it into requirements. Every member of NetSecOPEN has a membership agreement that they have to sign and abide by, and then over and above that, all of the test labs have a labs agreement that is even more rigorous and requires them to adhere to this open nature of testing, and agree to stick to what is outlined. And there's also a clause in there where NetSecOPEN will verify their competence on a regular basis. So the NetSecOPEN standards and guidelines are developed by the NetSecOPEN membership. And then once we think they're ready for the light of day, then we submit them to the IETF working group for adoption as an RFC. We give over the intellectual property that has been developed by the NetSecOPEN membership freely to the IETF. So the IETF then becomes the intellectual, the work that we've done then becomes the intellectual property of the IETF. And our IP policy is bound to the IP policy that the IETF operates under, and that's part of the membership agreement as well. Next slide, please, Stephen. So the standard consists of a number of different areas, and I could spend a couple of hours going through things in detail, but just very basically, we have 9 test categories plus a security effectiveness verification category. They're all listed here. A throughput capabilities with a traffic mix. This has been the one area that has been most difficult to provide reproducible results that are comparable from test tool to test tool. We're working on it. We're not quite there yet, but all 3 test tool vendors are actively involved in implementing this. In addition to that, we have the connections per second, both for HTTP and HTTPS throughput for HTTP and HTTPS transaction latency for both, and then the concurrent connection capacity. All of this is very useful. All of this is very typical in performance testing. What makes what we do different from other labs is we require the product that's under test to be configured to address all of the security effectiveness requirements up front. For the right now, what we're doing is we have exploit sample set, both a public and a private set, that we will have the labs configure the products to be able to address that. So they will be able to mitigate all of the exploits that the product is being subjected to with. The mitigation of that can be done in a number of different areas. You know, like the WatchGuard product is going to be different from one of their competitors and another competitor and so on. We don't get down to the level of detail of saying that you have to configure the product this way. What we say is that you have to be able to configure the product that can mitigate all the issues that we're going to be throwing at it. Once that mitigation is proven to be solid, then the lab will lock down the configuration at that point and then do the performance testing on top of that. So all the traffic that that is the DUT is being subjected with will have to go through the policy engine, and that will create a real world scenario that security decisions are being made, and that will impact performance characteristics of products. And we feel that that's really important because a lot of performance testing that out there, one of the criticisms has been, says, well, you know, this vendor, their numbers are really good, but they've essentially just made their firewall a router. This vendor said, well, they did a minimum level of sort of network IPS style filtering, but it was really just in detection mode. It wasn't in prevention mode. They turned off the malware certification or malware inspection engine, that sort of thing. And we felt that it was really important to address that. We're not resting on our laurels here. We're significantly raising the bar. What's coming out fairly soon will be exploit sample set of exploits that you find in the vulnerability database hosted by NIST. And it's going to be probably in the neighborhood of somewhere between 500 and 1,000 exploits, and they'll be required. All DUTs will be required to identify and mitigate all of these exploits. And we're doing the same thing with malware. And so that will be something that has to happen first from a mitigation point of view before a DUT can move on to the performance testing portion of the test, and the results will be reported. What we're trying to decide right now, and your input would be useful, we're trying to decide is do we have a pass-fail requirement, or do we just report the results? I can see value in both. The problem with pass-fail, it then becomes kind of arbitrary. And some people will say like 99% detection and mitigation it should be the pass requirement. Other people will be fine with 95% or less. I'm thinking that maybe the right approach would be just report. And quite frankly, if you have a vendor who only gets a 75% successful detection rate, that may prevent or make them decide that to improve their product. So that's a current debate that's open, openly being discussed within NetSecOPEN. Next slide, Stephen. So what we report are the key performance indicators, and I'm not going to waste your time by enumerating everyone, but these key performance indicators are very clearly defined within the standard that we have submitted, and we're constantly sort of looking at it and tweaking it a little bit, and embedded within the standard is what we consider to be acceptable behavior, acceptable levels of performance. And then all of these key performance indicators are recorded and reported by the labs in their reports. And then we analyze things a little bit more in a little bit more depth in the certification report. We'll take the actual data that is produced by the test runs and analyze it ourselves and produce charts that reflect the behavior. The benefit of doing that analysis for our certification reports is twofold. One, it will allow us to graphically represent the performance characteristics of a product, and it's useful to folks such as yourself. But it's also a way of us to verify that the testing behavior of the DUTs makes sense, and has frequently brought to light areas that has caused us to go back to the labs to question things and ask. A couple times we've asked them to rerun some tests, and it's led to other questions. So it's a way of verifying the results and not just taking everything at face value. Next slide, Steve. So the certification process is really worth looking at in a little bit more detail. NetSecOPEN itself doesn't do any testing. NetSecOPEN does not contract with a lab to do testing. The product vendor opens into a testing contract with a NetSecOPEN approved test lab directly. The test lab then will conduct the tests, and at the end of the day, provide the test report to the product vendor for review. The product vendor will then request, assuming everything works fine, will then request the test lab to send the test report over to NetSecOPEN to compose the certification report. Once the certification report has been completed, the NetSecOPEN certification body reviews that and the test report, and then will approve the report and award certification. The detailed test report, as I mentioned earlier, the certification report, the test tool configuration information, and the DUT config, and it's the actual config taken from the DUT, are made available via the NetSecOPEN website. Next slide, Stephen. So there are exceptions to the certification process. Product vendor can elect at any time to withdraw a product from testing. Now, this is different from testing that's been done in some other labs where they're doing comparison tests or group tests or something like that, and the product vendor, once the testing starts, cannot withdraw the product from testing, and the results could be reported. After the review of the test report, the product vendor can ask the test lab to reduce some tests. However, any tests that are redone must be documented in the test report. If the tests are being redone as a result of a change to the configuration of the DUT, then that means that the full test must be restarted from the beginning. So the whole point is that everything gets locked down on the DUT for the test to be rerun. Even at that point, the product vendor could choose not to submit the report for a certification review. So it's important to understand that the product vendor is in complete control of the information that is resulting from the test reports up until the time it is submitted for a certification review. The certification body can elect to ask the test lab or the product vendor for clarifications of results, like I talked about on a previous page. This may include redoing some additional testings, conducted spot check or whatever. And then any decisions made by any approved test lab or the NetSecOPEN certification body can ultimately be appealed to the NetSecOPEN board of directors. So the whole point is that we're not there's a avenue always open for folks whose products are being tested to be able to appeal the results or decide to not submit results, or if they have a disagreement, the ultimate authority will be the NetSecOPEN board of directors. Next slide, Stephen. So that's it.
All right. Thank you very much, Brian. That was fantastic. So we're going to talk a little bit about WatchGuard and why we decided to engage with NetSecOPEN and why this type of testing procedure and process is very important, we think, to the firewall industry at large. And so for those folks on the call who might not know who WatchGuard is, we've been one of the bigger firewall players since the mid-90s, since 1996. We're one of the original firewall providers in the network security industry. We've provided fireboxes predominantly to mid-market and small businesses for the last decade or so. So we're really focused on the smaller organizations at large as opposed to the large enterprise organizations. And we'll discuss what that means going forward in the next couple of slides. But one of the things that's really important to understand about WatchGuard is we're well recognized for our security efficacy. We're trusted by many, many customers around the world to protect their networks, to protect their users. On average, the average firebox blocks roughly 250 network attacks a year, roughly 1,300 malicious files per device per year. And again, these are smaller organizations, so these are typically devices that are going to be deployed in regional offices, small retail locations, those type of things where they're not going to have the same traffic, let's say, that you might see in a large enterprise in that type of device. So some of the guiding principles for how we design the firebox, things that we think are very, very important today to protect businesses. One of the first ones is best-in-class SSL TLS decryption. We believe that inspecting encrypted traffic, applying security services to that traffic to find malware, to find intrusions is something that every organization should be doing today. In some of our own testing, we've seen upwards of 80% of malware using SSL encryption to sneak by traditional network protection. So if you're not encrypting that traffic, that means a huge amount of malware and other type of attacks could be sneaking by your environment. We also offer 3 layers of zero-day protection. So really 3 redundant layers of anti-malware capability, things like cloud sandboxing. We have a signatureless AI engine as well as your traditional signature-based malware detection on the network. And this is really, again, designed to suss out that malware, specifically the evasive zero-day type of attacks that could be thrown against your network. We also feel like DNS filtering is a very important solution to have today. DNS filtering can provide a very early stage opportunity to intercept things like phishing attacks and block risky clicks from going to areas where they might download files or become a victim of a fraud or a phishing attack. So having that first level of defense, that first line of defense being a DNS filtering solution is something we think is very, very important. We also offer what we call Access Portal, and this allows you to extend access to your sensitive applications, your web applications, using the platform itself, allow you to have things like multi-factor authentication requirements to use that secure tunnel back into those resources. And that's something that comes standard on the Firebox platform. And then finally, mobile VPN, obviously a very, very big topic this year with the COVID-19 outbreak. Suddenly a lot of our employees were scattered home and working in remote locations a lot more than ever. And so having the opportunity to have integrated mobile VPN and support the VPNs that are important and provide the efficacy you require for your organization is something that's very important to what WatchGuard does on the Firebox platform as well. So I mentioned that we really focus on smaller organizations, but we pride ourselves on providing enterprise-grade security for these organizations. And today, we have over 385,000 active WatchGuard Firebox deployments around the globe. Again, primarily focused on mid-sized businesses, distributed enterprises, and industry focus in retail, hospitality, government, and education. Those are really our core sweet spots for the WatchGuard product. And so one of the things that we offer with the Firebox is really 2 tiers of licensing. We have our total security suite, which is our top level, includes all of our security services on the network security side of the house. Then we offer our basic security, which is going to include your basic things like antivirus, signature-based antivirus. And I put this chart up just to show that when you add some of those next level or next generation, I'll say, security services, things like our intelligent AV, which uses the Cylance artificial intelligence engine to detect malware, things like APT blocker, which is our cloud sandboxing solution. You can really detect a lot more attacks with this total security suite. And we saw that on average, you could detect and block nearly 3,000 more attacks when you add those higher level services to the box. So really powerful security that we offer within the total security suite on each one of these fireboxes. And then on top of that, we have our WatchGuard cloud platform, which today you can use for full visibility into your network, so you can make timely, informed, and effective decisions about your security anywhere, anytime. So it's a cloud delivered service, it's multi-tier, multi-tenant, and this is something that actually we're building quite a bit on here in the next few months as far as management capabilities, things like cloud deployment, easy policy management, configuration templates. So a lot to come with WatchGuard Cloud as our central management platform for the fireboxes going forward. And so one of the things that we talked about in this session is how WatchGuard has engaged with NetSecOPEN. And so really one of the big reasons that we feel that engaging with NetSecOPEN is so important is, like Brian mentioned, is transparency and the idea that we'll all be playing from the same sheet of music, so to speak, as a network security vendor. You know, I'm a marketing person, so it'd be easy for me to tell you that, you know, the bigger number, the better, right? And taking the opportunity, let's say, to put the thumb on the scale when you release a new product and you have, you know, throughput figures that you're trying to publish. And what we've seen, you know, across the competitors and the industry at large is that, you know, when they have documented on their data sheets and their various publications, their throughput figures, there's a lot of wiggle room in what they're actually, in what they publish and what the actual testing methodologies used behind that published figure is. And so we really believe in the idea that customers who are looking to purchase a firewall product should have an idea of an apples to apples comparison that they can make and understand that each one of these products, each one of these products performs under the same testing environment. And so that's why we've participated with NetSecOPEN. Our first testing scenario was really on our highest performance box, our Firebox M4800. And again, we are not targeting the enterprise industry. So this is a box that would be sold to a smaller subset of our customers than our tabletop appliances or our smaller rack mount appliances. But this is the one we wanted to start with on our NetSecOPEN testing because it's our latest platform. And so I have a couple of the throughput performance figures for the Firebox M4800 model here as a result of these testing scenarios. So 15.7 gigabytes on HTTPS at 256K. 5 gigabytes with the encrypted traffic. And then when you use a more standard internet mix, you might see in a traditional business network, 8.7 gigabytes on a traditional mix, and then 3.1 gigabytes per second on HTTPS. Some other things to note on the Firebox M5800, as well as the tier down, the 4800, we have optional expansion modules. So these are really designed to grow as your network grows and adapt as maybe you want to evolve that network. So adding fiber or copper connections as an example. We have module bays there, open module bays that you can use to expand each one of these appliances. So we have 4 options of those modules available today, a 4 times 10 gig fiber, 8 times 1 gig fiber, 8 times 1 gig copper, and then 2 40 gig copper, or excuse me, fiber modules that are available for both of these appliances today. So with that, I think we'll move to any questions folks might have.
Yes, thank you, Brian, and thank you, Stephen, for that wonderful presentation. We have the contact information listed on the site right now as you see it. So if you definitely have a question that you'd like to ask personally, feel free to email us directly. So terms of questions, yes, we definitely do have a ton of questions coming in. So thank you for sending them in. You still have time to send them in right now. We're gonna continue to answer them. So the first one here is for Brian, it looks like. So how long has NetSecOPEN been around? How many employees do you guys have?
So NetSecOPEN has been around for about 3 years, and as far as employees go, I'm going to interpret the question as being more along the lines of how many people do we have involved in and working on producing the requirements and doing the heavy lifting of the work. And we consistently have on our biweekly calls around somewhere between 20 and 30 people participate on these calls on a regular basis. The working groups are led by volunteer leaders. The board of directors are all volunteers. There's one paid employee, that is myself, and then we have probably about 3 people that we contract with for various things.
Got it. Thank you, Brian. And another question for Brian as well. So who submits their product for testing, like the vendors, or do you select the vendors?
No, we don't select the vendors. It's vendors, the security product vendors are free to work with any of the accredited labs at any time. The only time that we have something like a group test or something somewhat analogous to that will be when there's been significant changes made to the test requirements. For example, when we finally add the vulnerability sets and the malware sample sets for testing, that'll be a significant change. And we'll be encouraging vendors to participate in those tests because we're going to drop a press release. But generally speaking, it's up to the vendors to decide when they're ready to have their products tested.
Got it. Thank you, Brian. And a kind of a follow-up to that question. So, do you work with experts on the products to make sure it's configured correctly?
The test labs do, yes. They work hand in glove with the security product vendors to ensure that the products are functioning in a manner that will deliver the best results. That's actually probably the longest phase of the test because there's a lot of back and forth to be able to configure the products in the manner that will produce the best results. But we leave that to the security product vendors and the test labs to work out. The only time that we get involved is when we review the final results.
Got it. Thank you, Brian. And I have another question here. So is it possible to have a situation where everything is all protected? Just a scenario, a hypothetical situation. Has that ever happened?
No.
Well, yes, no. That's the short answer is no. At WatchGuard, we're big proponents, and I'm sure Brian, you are too, of defense in depth. It's about layered protection. There's never going to be a silver bullet security product. Anybody who comes to you and says, "Hey, we have a silver bullet, you can throw everything else out," is selling snake oil. So it's really about layered protection, and certainly a firewall is an important layer of protection. And certainly at WatchGuard, we believe that inspecting things like encrypted traffic, deep packet inspection of encrypted traffic is a layer that should be in every modern business today if they really want to stay safe from the most recent nasty stuff that's out there.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you both. And I have a question here that keeps popping up here. So HTTPS deep inspection was talked about, but not listed on the slides. Is HTTPS deep inspection a requirement of testing?
Yes, in particularly in the matter of where the exploits use HTTPS as the attack vector, and we do expect decryption to be working, and one of the requirements, if you take a look at the draft, is we indicate what cipher suites should be at a minimum should be used. And we list in the reports the cipher suite that is actually used for both encryption and decryption.
Got it. Thanks, Brian. And another question here. So how are new firmware versions tested, approved, and certified? Is there a requirement for those?
The certifications are version specific. So if WatchGuard, for example, was to rev their firmware, a month from now, the certification would not apply to that version of the firmware. And I, of course, would encourage them to get the product tested.
Yeah, and just to add to that, we have had instances in the last few years on the Firebox platform where we've released new fireware OS that improved some of our deep packet inspection figures or our performance there. So that might be an instance where we might take, the 5800 as an example here, if that same thing were to happen, and go back to Brian and his team and have them retest the platform and refresh that rate. And actually, I think we've seen some competitors who've done that on some of their specific boxes. Yeah.
Yep, that has happened.
Perfect. Okay, thanks both. And then here's one for Stephen. Let's see here. Will the M670, M570, M470, will those be tested also, Steve?
So the way we're going to do testing going forward, at least as the plan as I understand it now, is on new product releases. I don't anticipate we'll go back and test platforms that were released, let's say 12 months ago, which I believe is when those were initially released. So it should be going forward, we'll do that. There might be instances where we'll make exceptions, but I don't know of any of at this point in time.
Okay, thank you, Steve. And then is the M5800 replacing the 5600, or is it a new product line altogether?
Yes, this is the updated hardware for compared to the 5600. And actually, to circle back to the question you just asked me, I believe the question was about M670, 570. Those are future generation platforms. So yeah, well, excuse me, no, those are previous releases. I apologize. Yes. Yes, that is the plan.
Got it. Thank you. And this one's for Brian. So do you maintain a library of submitted equipment, or will it be returned to the vendor?
That's up to the vendor and the test lab. I encourage the both parties to leave the equipment at the lab, but because the testing is version specific, I'm not going to be at all disconcerted if they want to have something back. Like, say, for example, you have a vendor whose firewall is geared to like a data center environment. They may not want to leave that piece of iron at a test lab forever. So the only thing that I will remind them is that if something comes in 6 months down the line that casts the results in doubt in some manner, there will be a requirement to retest, and they're going to need to be ready and able to resubmit the product to the test lab.
Got it. Thank you. All right, so I have another question here. So let's see. For Brian, what plans, mitigations do you have in place to prevent customized firmware or hardware for performance certification that may not be reflected in production products?
That's a very good question, and that's something that we sort of discussed quite a bit internally here. And one of our requirements is that all products tested, all versions of the product tested, must be versions that are available to the security product vendors' customers.
Got it. That makes sense. And another question here for Steve. So is there any plan to improve the WatchGuard integration with Splunk?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know offhand where we're at with our integration with Splunk specifically. I will say that a big effort and focus for WatchGuard and the network security portfolio going forward is integrations, improving our APIs just generally. We really want to work with MSPs, MSSPs. So we're wanting to improve any integration that'll improve their ease of use story there. And then just outside of that, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, we are pushing out updates to our WatchGuard cloud platform, which is going to provide a lot of visibility and management capabilities and a much cloudy, more friendly user experience there as well.
Got it. Thank you, Steve. And this is kind of a question for you as well, Steve. So will cloud management take the place of management server?
So the plan is to have WatchGuard Management Server still available as your on-premise management platform, and then have WatchGuard Cloud as the cloud management platform.
Got it. Thank you. All right. So moving to Brian. So will there be any tests regarding how well devices integrate with SIEMs?
That's not on our roadmap currently, but this is the sort of thing that getting feedback from enterprises, purchasing customers, and all that would be invaluable. That's something that is actually not something that I had considered, but should definitely bears looking at.
Got it. Thank you. And another question, Brian, is can certification labs be owned or be subsidiary of product vendors and certify their own products?
Well, I used to work at ICSA Labs, and ICSA Labs was owned by Verizon, and Verizon offered up their own products and services that were actually in competition with some of the people that were customers of ICSA Labs. And one of the things that ICSA Labs made an effort to ensure was that there was an intellectual firewall between them and the mothership, so to speak. And we would look to labs to do the same sort of thing. There's no 100% guarantee, but given the fact that we are an open organization and we encourage everyone to participate, I'm very reluctant personally to start putting up barriers to participation. I'm a kind of person that believes in trust but verify. So I would have no problem believing that a lab was keeping information separate, but I would ask them to provide evidence to support that.
Got it. Thank you, Brian. And Steve, this question is for you. So what about next generation technologies, which we are planning to club in UTM?
Yeah, so I don't want to get into roadmap plans around what we have coming down the pike, so to speak, for the Firebox platform. I will say, in the last 18 months, we've added DNS filtering, we've added our intelligent AV, our AI-powered anti-malware capabilities. We've added access portals. So we've made significant investments in next generation, let's call it feature set and security capabilities on the platform in fairly recent times. And just more broadly, we are always keeping our ear to the ground on what's coming from a feature and capability standpoint or a security capability standpoint in the market and looking to integrate those things within the Firebox. So I don't really have anything that I could tell you about now. I think the next exciting development is going to be around cloud management, and those type of things is really where you'll hear a lot more.
Hey, Kristen, can I just loop back to the previous question? I actually read it in a little bit more detail, and I realized that I didn't answer it completely. So the the person asking the question asked actually, could a lab that is owned and operated by a security product vendor test and certify their own product? The short answer to that is they can test their product, but they won't be able to certify the product, because a lab, in order for it to get a NetSecOPEN certification, it must be an accredited lab. Now, if a security product vendor was prepared to jump through the hoops necessary to become an accredited lab, then that's something that we would consider, for the primary reason that the responsibility and the requirements of accredited labs to adhere to what we outlined for the labs as far as their conduct and so on will have to be met. But we would look very, very closely at something like that, and I suspect that if a lab came to us and actually wanted us to consider it, I would probably take that request to the board of directors for them to weigh in on.
Great, thanks for clarifying that, Brian. And another question here, I believe you did mention this a little bit earlier in a different question, but just to clarify, can a vendor submit a competitor's product for testing?
A vendor can contract with the test lab to have any products tested that they want to have tested. Don't forget that'll be subject to the end user licensing agreement that accompanies every product, and so it would be if that was to happen, I would encourage the test lab to make the vendor whose product was being submitted, that was actually not the vendor submitting the product. So it sounds confusing, but I would ask the test lab to make sure everybody involved was aware of what was going on. So it's a long way of saying yes, but.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you, Brian. And one here for Stephen. So is there any testing on wireless solutions like WatchGuard's WIP service?
So we haven't engaged with NetSecOPEN. I don't know that they do any of the Wi-Fi testing. If you're looking for security efficacy testing on our Wi-Fi products, we do, I think it's annually now, a Myrcom WIPS security testing scenario reports that Myrcom puts out. We put it out on our website around the trusted wireless environment, the 6 known wireless vulnerabilities and how to defend against them. And that's actually a competitive comparison. So it'll show, the top players in the Wi-Fi market and how they performed in those testing scenarios. So that's separate from what we've engaged with NetSecOPEN, but that is available on the website to you.
Got it. Thank you, Steve. And this question's for Brian. So what would prevent vendor from, say, making an IPS light configuration that scans just defined vulnerabilities to improve overall performance?
Yeah, we've anticipated that that scenario when we refer to it as a vendor gaming the test. And so the vulnerability sets that we produce will come in 2 flavors. One will be a public set that everyone will be aware of, and then there will be a private set that will only be available to the labs. And the only people that know what is in the private set will be NetSecOPEN itself, the labs, and the test tool vendors who put the private sets on their product. So say you have I don't know, 5,000 possible CVEs that could be chosen to become part of the vulnerability set. But at the end of the day, we decide only to have 750 in the public set and 200 in the private set. Theoretically, it would be possible for a vendor to then go and look at the 5,000 CVEs and produce signatures for all 5,000. I consider that a good thing. If a vendor actually chose to do that in order to ensure that their product covered everything, that would be a good thing. But if they wrote the signatures just to cover what's in the the public set, that'll become pretty obvious once we do the testing with the private set. And we'll trigger a number of questions that go back to the product vendor, asking them to explain the behavior.
Thank you, Brian. And the question I have here is, it looks like it's for both. So do you work with bank security?
So, it's not our core sweet spot. Banking isn't. I do believe we have some customers in banking. I don't know off the top of my head, but we work with anybody who has security concerns. We can meet compliance challenges and help businesses across all industries, really.
And one of the financial institutions that advise us periodically is one of the largest banks in the world, and I unfortunately not allowed to mention who it is, but their security people have advised us on occasion. But that's the sort of thing that we would love to be able to build up a core foundation of people in all of the major sectors in the industry, in the economy.
All right, so that concludes our questions that we had for this webinar. So thank you so much again to the presenters and everybody attending today. Once again, we will be sending out the email with the recording and options to follow up if you wish. And then otherwise, we will see you on the next webinar. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks for the invite.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.